The ache had become a familiar companion, a dull, thrumming presence just beneath Eliza's ribs. It had lived there for 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days, a silent tenant in the space that should have been occupied by her own, uncomplicated happiness. Instead, it was filled with Chloe. Everything was filled with Chloe. The scent of vanilla and coffee that clung to the cushions on their shared sofa, the sound of her laughter echoing from the hallway, the ghost of her warmth on a mug left on the counter. For Eliza, loving Chloe was as involuntary and as necessary as breathing, and it was slowly, quietly, suffocating her. Tonight, the ache was particularly acute. It sharpened into something closer to a blade every time Chloe mentioned his name. Mark. The name was a dull thud in Eliza's chest, a reminder of the neat, acceptable box Chloe's love was supposed to fit into, a box that had no room for a shape like Eliza. "I just don't get it," Chloe said, flopping dramatically onto the sofa, her socked feet landing in Eliza's lap. The casual contact sent a jolt, a familiar surge of forbidden electricity, up Eliza's spine. She fought to keep her expression neutral, to be the supportive friend, the unwavering rock. "We were good, weren't we?" He said all the right things, we did all the right things. It was like a checklist for a perfect relationship, and we ticked every box, but the whole time I just felt empty. Eliza hummed a non-committal agreement, her fingers itching to smooth out the anxious line between Chloe's brows. She resisted. She always resisted. Her role was clearly defined. She was the confidant, the keeper of secrets, the shoulder to cry on. She was the ghost at the feast of Chloe's life, always present, always watching, never truly part of the celebration. "Maybe checklists are the problem," Eliza offered, her voice softer than she intended. "Maybe love isn't something you can tick off a list." Chloe sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to drain the color from the room. She turned her head, her brilliant green eyes, flecked with gold, finding Eliza's. In that gaze, Eliza saw the charismatic, confident woman the world saw, but she also saw the cracks in the facade, the deep, searching loneliness that Chloe tried so hard to hide. It was this vulnerability that had first made Eliza fall in love with her. It was this vulnerability that made being just her friend an act of daily, painful martyrdom. "You always know what to say," Chloe murmured, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "You'd be so much better at all this love stuff than me." The irony was a physical blow, winding Eliza so completely she almost laughed. "If you only knew." The words were a frantic bird beating against the cage of her teeth, desperate for release. But she swallowed them down, just as she always did. Losing this fragile, painful closeness, was a risk she was too terrified to take. The friendship was a slow poison, but the thought of life without it was a sudden, violent death. She chose the poison. She chose it every single day. A week later, the poison began to feel like it was changing. The air in their small apartment grew thick with unspoken things, a tension that hummed just below the surface of their easy banter. Chloe had stopped talking about Mark, which Eliza had initially registered as a blessing. But the silence he left behind was quickly filled by something else, something less definable and infinitely more dangerous. It was filled with long, searching looks when Chloe thought Eliza wasn't watching. It was filled with conversations that skated precariously close to the edge of a cliff Eliza was determined to avoid. They were sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by takeout containers and nursing glasses of cheap red wine. A terrible romantic comedy was playing on the television, ignored by them both. "Do you think it's possible?" Chloe began, her voice a low murmur that sent shivers across Eliza's skin, "to love someone without even realizing it?" Eliza's heart did a painful, stuttering lurch. She focused on peeling the label from her wine bottle, her fingernail tracing the worn paper edge. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I mean, like, you think you're just friends, you think that's all it is, and that feeling is the foundation for everything. But maybe you've just been building a different kind of house on that foundation the whole time, and you just didn't have the blueprint to see it." Her metaphor was tangled and confused, but Eliza understood it with a terrifying clarity. It was the story of her own heart. "I suppose it's possible," Eliza managed, daring a glance. Chloe was staring into the middle distance, her expression lost and pensive. Sometimes we're too close to things to see them for what they really are. Exactly, Chloe whispered, her gaze snapping back to Eliza. The intensity in her eyes made Eliza's breath catch. It felt like standing on a precipice, the world tilting on its axis. That's exactly it. The conversation ended there, but the shift was undeniable. A line had been crossed, a door creaked open. And Eliza, who had spent years guarding her heart, was filled with a terrifying, exhilarating hope that maybe, just maybe, Chloe was about to walk through it. It was 2 nights after that conversation that the world truly broke from its orbit. Another movie night, another bottle of wine. This time, however, the silence was not contemplative. It was heavy, charged, a living thing in the space between them on the sofa. Eliza could feel the heat radiating from Chloe's arm, though they weren't even touching. Every nerve ending in her body was on high alert, tuned to the woman beside her. To break the tension, to do anything to feel normal again, Eliza resorted to her usual defense mechanism, a joke. Chloe was lamenting her terrible luck with men, a familiar refrain. Well, Eliza said, aiming for a light, breezy tone, maybe you've just been fishing in the wrong pond entirely. The other pond has some excellent catches, I hear. She held her breath. It was a flirtation so subtle it was barely there, a feather-light touch of a hint. Chloe looked at her, and for a second, Eliza's heart stopped. Then Chloe laughed. It wasn't her usual bright, full-throated laugh. It was a small, breathy sound, laced with something Eliza couldn't identify. Surprise? Confusion? It wasn't dismissal, though. It wasn't the sound of a straight girl laughing off a clumsy pass. It was the sound of a question. The sound sliced through Eliza's carefully constructed walls. It was a disaster. She'd misread everything. The looks, the conversations, the tension, it was all in her head. A wave of heat rushed to her cheeks, a humiliating flush of shame and regret. She had ruined it. She had ruined everything. Sorry, she mumbled, looking down at her hands in her lap. That was dumb. No, Chloe said softly. It wasn't. And then, propelled by a desperate, self-destructive impulse to reclaim the moment, to prove something, she didn't even know what, Eliza reached out. Her movements felt slow, syrupy, as if moving through water. Her hand covered Chloe's where it rested on the worn denim of her thigh. It was the most terrifying thing she had ever done. She braced for the recoil, for Chloe to snatch her hand away as if burned. She braced for the awkward apology, the hasty retreat to their separate bedrooms, the new and unbearable distance that would now define their friendship. She braced for the end of her world. But it didn't come. Chloe didn't move. Her hand remained perfectly still under Eliza's, warm and solid. Eliza's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, a wild rhythm that seemed loud enough to fill the entire apartment. She stared at their hands, at her paler, trembling fingers covering Chloe's tanned, steady ones. An eternity seemed to pass in that single, silent moment of contact. The air crackled. The world stopped spinning. Chloe didn't move. Slowly, so slowly it was almost imperceptible, Chloe's fingers shifted beneath hers, a subtle adjustment, not of retreat, but of acceptance. And then, her thumb stroked the side of Eliza's hand. A single, deliberate, earth-shattering motion. Eliza's gaze shot up from their hands to Chloe's face. The laughter was gone. In its place was an expression of such raw, unguarded wonder that it stole the breath from Eliza's lungs. Chloe's eyes were wide, her lips were slightly parted, and she was looking at Eliza as if she had never truly seen her before. The world hadn't ended. It had just begun. The days that followed were a strange, beautiful torment. The touch had broken the seal on something, and now intimacy bled into every moment they shared. It was in the way their shoulders brushed when they passed in the narrow hallway, a contact that now lingered for a fraction of a second too long. It was in the way Chloe's hand would find Eliza's arm when she laughed, a casual gesture made profound by the memory of that night on the sofa. Eliza felt like she was living in a dream, perpetually holding her breath, waiting for the moment she would wake up. The hope was a fragile, tender thing, a seedling pushing its way through the compacted earth of her long-held resignation. She was terrified of crushing it. The charged conversations continued, growing bolder. They sat on the balcony one evening, wrapped in blankets against the encroaching chill, the city lights a glittering tapestry below. "What does real love feel like?" Chloe asked, her voice quiet, almost lost to the breeze. "Do you, I mean?" Eliza thought of the constant, humming ache in her chest, of the electric shock of a simple touch, of the desperate need to make this one person happy, even at her own expense. "It feels like coming home," she said, her voice thick with an emotion she didn't try to hide. "It feels safe. Like you can finally put down this heavy thing you've been carrying, and you didn't even realize how heavy it was until it was gone." Chloe was silent for a long time, her profile etched against the darkening sky. When she finally spoke, her words were a bare whisper. "I've never felt that. Not with Mark. Not with anyone." She turned to Eliza, her eyes shimmering in the dim light. "I feel safe with you." The confession hung between them, simple and devastating. It wasn't an "I love you," but it felt closer, more fundamental. It was a piece of the puzzle Eliza hadn't even known was missing, and it clicked into place with a resounding, soul-deep certainty. Physical contact became a new, unspoken language. One afternoon, while they were cooking together in the cramped kitchen, a strand of hair fell across Chloe's face. Without thinking, with an instinct that felt more natural than breathing, Eliza reached up and tucked it behind her ear. Her fingers brushed the shell of Chloe's ear, the soft skin of her temple. A tremor went through Chloe. Her eyes fluttered shut for a brief second. When she opened them, they were dark, searching. Eliza's hand froze, hovering in the space by Chloe's cheek. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of garlic and basil and something else, something elemental and wild. Chloe leaned into the touch, a minute, almost imperceptible movement that was as good as a shout. Her gaze dropped, for the first time, to Eliza's lips. It was a flicker, a half-second of blatant want, but it was there. Eliza saw it. She felt it like a brand. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This is real. This is happening. But the moment was fragile. A pot bubbled over on the stove, hissing, and they both jumped, breaking the spell. They finished making dinner in a tense, buzzing silence, their hands brushing constantly, each touch a small explosion of feeling. Eliza lived in a state of suspended animation, caught between the terror of what this was becoming and the sheer, blinding joy of it. She caught Chloe watching her constantly now, with a new softness in her expression, a vulnerability that mirrored Eliza's own. The charismatic, confident mask was gone when it was just the two of them, replaced by a woman who seemed to be discovering the world, and herself, for the very first time. The breaking point arrived, as Eliza knew it must. It came not with a bang, but with a quiet, desperate question. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the hand-touching incident. 3 weeks of escalating tension, of lingering touches, and soul-bearing conversations. Eliza had been retreating, just slightly. The hope was becoming too big, too bright, and the fear of it being extinguished was more than she could bear. She had started making excuses to go to bed early, to spend evenings in her room with a book she couldn't focus on, creating a sliver of distance to protect herself. Chloe would not allow it. She knocked on Eliza's bedroom door late one night. Eliza's heart leaped into her throat. She said to come in, her voice sounding small and weak to her own ears. Chloe entered, closing the door softly behind her. She wasn't wearing her usual bright smile. Her face was pale, her expression serious, her hands twisting together in front of her. She looked scared. "You've been avoiding me," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact, soft and wounded. Eliza couldn't meet her eyes. She stared at the pattern on her duvet. "No, I haven't. I've just been tired." The lie was flimsy, pathetic. "Please don't lie to me, Eli," Chloe whispered, and the shortened version of her name, a name Chloe only used in moments of deep affection, was like a knife turning in her gut. "Not now. Not after everything. Something is happening between us, and you're running from it. And I need to know why. What aren't you telling me?" There it was. The direct question. The point of no return. The air crackled with the weight of it, with years of unspoken words. Eliza's carefully built dam of self-preservation began to crack under the pressure. "Chloe," she started, her voice breaking. "I'm so confused," Chloe went on, her own voice trembling as she took a step closer to the bed. "My whole life, I've had this path. You go to school, you get a job, you find a good man, you get married. I was on the path. With Mark, I was walking right down the middle of it. And I was miserable. I felt like I was playing a part in a play about someone else's life." She sat on the edge of the bed, being careful not to touch Eliza, but her proximity was a gravitational force, pulling all the air from Eliza's lungs. "And then, I don't know when it started. I look at you and the path just disappears. The whole world disappears. And there's just you." And this feeling, she shook her head, a look of frustrated wonder on her face. "I don't have a name for this feeling, Eliza. It's not friendship. It's more. It's bigger." She finally looked up, her green eyes swimming with tears. "I think," she swallowed hard, "I think I might not be as straight as I always thought I was." The words were barely audible, a fragile confession offered up into the sacred silence of the room. "And I think I've been thinking about kissing you. A lot." Eliza's world shattered. Not into pieces of pain and loss, but into a million shimmering fragments of impossible light. The pre-confession, the thing she had dreamed of and feared in equal measure, was real. It was here. The dam didn't just crack, it burst. A sob tore from Eliza's throat, a sound of grief and relief all at once. Tears she had held back for years finally fell, hot and fast down her cheeks. "Oh, Chloe," she wept, the words tumbling out on a broken breath. "You have no idea. Tell me," Chloe pleaded, her voice cracking. She finally moved, her hand covering Eliza's on the comforter. The touch was electric, grounding. "Please, Eli. Tell me." Eliza took a shuddering breath, a lifetime of secrets welling up inside her. This was it. There was no going back. She could hide, or she could leap. She looked at the beautiful, terrified, wonderful woman sitting on her bed, offering up her own bewildered heart. She leaped. "I love you," Eliza whispered, the words feeling both foreign and profoundly right on her tongue. The secret was out, and the world didn't end. It just held its breath. "I've been in love with you for 2 years, for months, and what feels like my whole life." A single tear spilled from Chloe's eye and traced a path down her cheek. She didn't look shocked. She looked like she was finally understanding the answer to a question she hadn't even known how to ask. A soft, wondering sound escaped her lips. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Eli. 2 years." Eliza could only nod, fresh tears blurring her vision. "Every time you talked about Mark, every time you went on a date, it was like a knife twisting. I tried so hard to just be your friend, to be happy for you, but it was—" She trailed off, unable to articulate the depth of the pain. Chloe's expression crumpled, a look of dawning comprehension and regret on her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her thumb stroking Eliza's knuckles. "I was so blind. I was so asleep. And you were right here the whole time." She leaned closer, her other hand coming up to cup Eliza's jaw, her touch impossibly gentle. Her face was inches away, her warm, vanilla-scented breath ghosting across Eliza's lips. The entire universe had shrunk to the space between them. "Is it, can I?" Chloe asked, her voice a raw, hesitant whisper. Her eyes searched Eliza's, asking for permission, for reassurance, for a final sign that this leap was one they were taking together. Eliza didn't need words. She gave a small, jerky nod, her heart feeling like it was about to beat its way out of her chest. Chloe closed the small distance between them. The first brush of her lips against Eliza's was tentative, soft, a question asked in the language of touch. It was feather-light and packed with years of unspoken longing, with fear and hope and the earth-shattering relief of arrival. It tasted of salt from both their tears and of wine, and of something that was just purely Chloe. A shudder went through Eliza, a wave of pure sensation that washed away all the years of pain and longing. This was real. This wasn't a dream. She leaned into the kiss, her own hand coming up to tangle in the soft hair at the nape of Chloe's neck. The kiss deepened, the initial hesitation melting away into a current of certainty and desperate need. It wasn't a kiss of explosive passion, but of profound discovery. It was a kiss that said it's you. It was a kiss that said finally. It was a kiss that said I'm home. When they finally broke apart, they didn't move far. Their foreheads rested together, their breath mingling in the charged air. Eliza's eyes were still closed, trying to commit every second of the last few minutes to memory. Wow, Chloe breathed out, the word a soft puff of air against Eliza's skin. Oh, was all Eliza could manage, a sound of pure, unadulterated wonder. That felt, Chloe started, then stopped, searching for the right word. She opened her eyes, her green irises so close they were all Eliza could see. That felt right. More right than anything in my entire life. A giddy, incredulous laugh bubbled up out of Eliza. It was a sound of pure, untainted joy. Yeah, she agreed, her voice trembling. It really, really did. They stayed like that for a long moment, simply breathing each other in, letting the reality of what had just happened settle over them. The world had irrevocably tilted, and they had landed on their feet, together. But the ground was new and unfamiliar. I'm terrified, Chloe admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper, a thread of anxiety weaving through the relief. She pulled back just enough to see Eliza's full face. Eliza's heart clenched with a fierce protectiveness. She gave a small, watery smile. Good. Me too. The shared admission was a comfort, an anchor in the dizzying sea of their new reality. They weren't pretending this was easy. What does this mean? Chloe asked, her gaze searching, vulnerable. What do we do now? I don't know, Eliza answered honestly, her thumb stroking Chloe's cheek. We figure it out. Together. One day at a time. A look of profound realization dawned on Chloe's face, as if she were recontextualizing her entire past in light of this one perfect, terrifying moment. All those times I complained about Mark, she said slowly, her voice filled with awe. About feeling like something was missing. I think I know what it was now. I was measuring every relationship against what I had with you. The way you listen to me, the way I can be completely myself around you, the way you make me feel safe. She shook her head, a small, disbelieving laugh escaping her. They all came up so short. I just didn't know what the measuring stick was. The confession landed in Eliza's heart, healing old wounds she hadn't even realized were still bleeding. All those nights spent listening, absorbing Chloe's pain while nursing her own, had not been for nothing. They had been the foundation. Chloe had been building their house all along, she just hadn't known it. We'll be scared together, Eliza said, her voice firm with a newfound certainty. And we'll figure it out together. Chloe's answering smile was like the sun breaking through the clouds. Okay, she whispered. Okay, she leaned in and kissed Eliza again, and this time there was no hesitation, only the sweet, breathtaking promise of a beginning. 3 weeks later, the terror had not vanished entirely, but it had subsided into a background hum, easily ignored. In its place, a quiet, simple joy had bloomed, filling every corner of their apartment, every moment of their shared lives. They had fallen into a new rhythm, one that felt less like a discovery and more like a remembrance of a song they had always known. Mark had called a week ago. Eliza had heard Chloe's side of the conversation from the kitchen, where she'd been making coffee, her stomach a knot of ancient insecurity. But Chloe's voice had been kind, clear, and unwavering. There had been no apologies, no justifications, only a simple, honest truth. She was happy now. When she'd hung up, she came into the kitchen, wrapped her arms around Eliza from behind, and buried her face in her shoulder. It's over, she'd murmured into Eliza's sweater. That whole part of my life. It's finally really over. This morning, Eliza woke to the scent of coffee already brewing and the soft weight of Chloe's head on her chest. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, painting golden stripes across the duvet. She lay still, watching the dust motes dance in the light, her heart full to the point of aching, but this time it was a good ache. It was the ache of a space being filled to overflowing. Chloe stirred, nuzzling closer before her eyes fluttered open. She blinked up at Eliza, a slow, sleepy smile spreading across her face. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "Morning," Eliza whispered back, her fingers gently brushing a stray piece of hair from Chloe's forehead. This simple, domestic intimacy felt more profound than any grand romantic gesture ever could. This was real. This was their life now. "I had a dream," Chloe said, propping herself up on one elbow. "I dreamed I was on that path again, the one I told you about. But this time, when I looked at you, it didn't disappear. It just bent. It curved right over to where you were standing and kept going." Eliza's heart swelled. She reached out, her hand finding Chloe's. Their fingers intertwined, a perfect, familiar fit. "Then we're both exactly where we need to be." Chloe's smile was radiant, a pure, unadulterated expression of happiness that Eliza knew she would never get tired of seeing. She understood now that love wasn't about checklists or prescribed paths. It wasn't about what the world told you it should be. It was about the quiet, earth-shattering realization that home wasn't a place, but a person. It was about finding the one soul who made the entire universe quiet down, who made you feel safe enough to finally, truly be yourself. Sometimes, the most beautiful love stories were not the ones you chased, but the ones that had been waiting patiently, right beside you, all along.